Why was she always the one no one noticed? At the library desk, Emily Carter smiled politely, stamped borrowed books, and listened to the familiar shuffle of shoes across the floor. But behind that quiet smile, behind the tidy stack of novels and encyclopedias, her mind was already somewhere else, calculating distances, adjusting for wind, rehearsing drills she would never speak of aloud. To her neighbors, she was simply the young woman with the soft eyes who lived alone and liked books. They didn't know that every glance she cast out the window measured angles. Every quiet pause carried the discipline of a soldier in disguise. Emily had built her life in layers, each one carefully laid to conceal the truth. At dawn, when the hills of Willow Creek were still silver with mist, she rose before the town did. Coffee brewed, steam curling in the half-light in her hands, steady, precise, cleaned and checked a rifle few had ever seen. Her mornings were silent rituals of preparation, disguised as ordinary routine. By day she catalogued dusty shelves, answered questions about novels, and leaned into the rhythm of a small-town library. By evening she walked the forest, silent, observing. At night the clearing became her range. Targets at different distances, breaths aligned with heartbeats, shots so clean they never echoed beyond the trees. But no one asked where her precision came from. No one wondered why her movements carried a strange grace, or why her eyes seemed to see more than anyone else. The truth had a name, Colonel Richard Hawkeye Mason. Years ago, when Emily was 16, he had appeared from the trees like a shadow of history itself. A man whose reputation was so whispered, so myth-like, that even seasoned soldiers doubted his existence. Mason had seen her shoot with a borrowed rifle, hesitant, unpolished, but focused. He didn't ask who she was. He told her who she could become. That day began years of training that few could survive. Endurance drills in snow and rain. Weeks learning to lie motionless in the mud while mosquitoes gnawed at her skin. Days without speaking, without moving, waiting for the moment when patience became power. Skill without conscience is a curse, Mason had told her. Precision means nothing if you do know why you're pulling the trigger. Those words never left her. Now, years later, Emily sat behind her library desk, listening to the whispers of townsfolk debating who'd win the next fishing contest, and she smiled as if she were part of them. But she was. Her secret was a shadow she carried alone, a secret she had promised Mason she would protect until the world forced her hand. That night the first sign came. A car parked too long on the edge of town, its windows tinted, its license plates unfamiliar. To anyone else it was nothing, a lost traveler, maybe a salesman. But to Emily it was a signal. She felt it in her chest, the subtle shift Mason had taught her to notice. The world was never as quiet as it seemed. She didn't go to the window. She didn't change her routine. She made tea, watered her plants, and turned out the lights. Only when the town slept did she slip out the back door, her steps silent, her jacket concealing a pistol she prayed she wouldn't have to use. In the tree line she waited. The figure emerged minutes later, broad-shouldered, moving with deliberate calculation. Not a drunk, not a wanderer. He paused at intervals, scanning, watching her house. Emily's breath slowed. Her heartbeat became metronomic, steady. She observed him like a hunter studies prey, nodding posture, angles, timing. She didn't confront him. Mason's lesson rang in her mind. Patience is not inaction, it is readiness. She let the shadow leave. Then she returned inside, silent, her tea still warm on the counter. That night she didn't sleep. She lay in bed, eyes open, counting the creaks of the house and the shifting wind. She remembered Mason's drills, weeks when he made her lie in a hide, waiting for a target that never appeared, teaching her that restraint was harder than action. Her body yearned to move, to fight, but her discipline held her still. The next day at the range, she smiled at the men who came to fire off hunting rifles. She lined up her own practice shots, each one a masterclass in control, though none of them realized it. She saw more than the targets. She saw tire tracks pressed into gravel, reflections off glass where they shouldn't be, a silhouette shifting in the distance. Someone was watching her, and whoever it was, they weren't amateurs. Emily kept her calm. To the others, she was the same Emily, quiet, polite, maybe a little mysterious. But inside, she was cataloging every detail, every footprint, every reflection, every sound. At night, she climbed the ridge behind her home, binoculars in hand, scanning the town below. She saw children laughing in porches, lights glowing warm in kitchens, shadows stretching long under street lamps. And she saw the other things, the vehicle that circled twice before parking, the stranger who lingered too long at the corner store. Patterns, behavior, signs. She felt it in her bones. Trouble was coming. Yet even then, Emily didn't let fear break her composure. Mason had prepared her for this. Every grueling drill, every word he spoke had been to mold her into this moment, a quiet guardian hidden in plain sight. Still, as she sat on the ridge, the rifle beside her, watching the town that trusted her without knowing why, a question haunted her. How long could she keep her secret before the world forced her to reveal the truth? And when that moment came, would Willow Creek see her as protector or as something far more dangerous? Why was the car still there? Emily Carter leaned against the counter of her kitchen, coffee cooling in her hand, eyes fixed on the narrow strip of road beyond the trees. Dawn had come soft and golden, spilling light over Willow Creek, yet the black sedan remained parked at the edge of town. Most people wouldn't notice, or if they did, they'd shrug. But Emily's gaze held steady, her instincts whispering that this was not chance. She remembered Mason's voice, sharp but calm, a weight in her memory. Patterns don't lie, people do. The world leaves signs, you just have to read them. Emily had read enough signs in the last week. The sedan, a stranger's reflection in the post office window, the faint crunch of footsteps outside her home the night before. None of it was random. Something was building. And yet she told no one. At the library, she greeted the townsfolk with the same soft smile, checked out books, and listened to chatter about the upcoming county fair. But beneath her calm exterior, her mind was restless, turning over details, cataloging threats. She moved with practiced patience, her hands steady even as her thoughts sharpened like the edge of a blade. "Morning, Emily," Mrs. Harper said, sliding a mystery novel across the desk. Emily smiled, stamped the book, and handed it back. "Enjoy it." Her voice was gentle, almost quiet. No one would have guessed that, hours earlier, she had mapped out possible surveillance positions overlooking her house. No one would have guessed that her eyes had measured angles of fire along Main Street. To them, she was the librarian, nothing more. That evening she returned to the woods. Her boots moved silently across pine needles, her body aligned with the rhythm of the forest. She paused often, crouching low, listening. A snap of a twig, the hush of leaves stirred by movement. Her senses were alive, every detail recorded. Mason had taught her that the forest itself was an ally if you learned its language. Tonight, the forest was whispering warnings. She reached her clearing and set up her range, targets at varied distances. The air crisp, wind cutting low from the north. She adjusted her scope, breathing slow. Every shot cracked the silence with surgical precision, holes punched into the wooden discs as if guided by inevitability. But she wasn't just practicing. She was preparing for something she couldn't yet name. By the time she returned home, the sedan was gone. But in its place, a new presence lingered. She felt it before she saw it, the subtle shift in air, the faint weight of being watched. She didn't look around. She didn't let her shoulders tense. She walked through her door as though nothing was wrong, placed her jacket on the chair, and lit a lamp. Only then, in the quiet glow of her kitchen, did she allow herself to exhale. Mason's words echoed in her mind. The first mistake most people make is to act too soon. Let them reveal themselves. The patient sniper wins long before the trigger is pulled. She set her pistol on the table, cleaned it with meticulous care, and replayed the memory of that shadow in her mind. Broad-shouldered, measured in his steps, not careless, not local. Whoever he was, he knew what he was doing. Emily lay awake again that night. The house creaked. The wind pressed against the windows, and her thoughts circled endlessly. Who was watching her? Why now? Was it her competitions that had drawn attention, or had someone finally uncovered her connection to Mason? The uncertainty pressed against her ribs like weight. Fear tried to creep in, but she refused to give it space. Instead, she turned it into focus, into readiness. The next day at the range confirmed her suspicions. Among the casual shooters, laughter and easy chatter masking missed shots, there was one detail out of place: a glint of light at the edge of the woods, a reflection, metallic, deliberate, and positioned just beyond normal sight. Emily adjusted her stance, fired her round, and without turning her head noted the angle. Someone was watching. Again. She left before the others, calm, steady, her rifle bag slung casually over her shoulder. But as she walked, her pulse drummed steady and low. The watcher was not clumsy. He was trained. That meant this was no coincidence. That night she climbed the ridge again. Binoculars pressed to her eyes, she scanned the streets below. Cars glided by, porch lights flickered on, and neighbors sat on steps, sharing evening talk. The world looked normal, but Emily knew better. She traced the shadows, measured the angles, and mapped possible observation points. She saw him then, just for a moment. A silhouette lingering near the gas station, too still, too watchful. He didn't belong. And though he faded back into the darkness within seconds, Emily's chest tightened. This was real. She lowered the binoculars slowly, her breath misting in the night air. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. And somewhere even farther, Mason's voice echoed in memory. The day will come when you're not just practicing. The day will come when silence turns to confrontation. And you'll know, you'll feel it when that moment arrives. Emily's fingers brushed the rifle at her side. She whispered into the darkness, though no one could hear, "I feel it now." And deep down, she knew. The shadow had come to Willow Creek, and whatever it wanted, it was only the beginning. Why didn't anyone else see it? On Main Street, shopkeepers chatted about weather and sales, kids darted between candy stores and bike racks, and the hum of ordinary life wrapped Willow Creek in its usual calm. But Emily Carter felt the fracture. Subtle, invisible to the rest, yet undeniable. Trucks with plates from out of state parked near the industrial edge of town. Strangers lingered a little too long outside businesses. Deliveries arrived late, rhythms altered. She moved among the people as if untouched by worry, carrying books from the library, offering polite greetings. But her mind was elsewhere, mapping every detail. Mason's lessons whispered constantly in her thoughts. The smallest detail tells the biggest story. Watch, don't interfere. Not yet. That night she stood by her window, light dim, notebook open. The pages were filled with coded sketches, vehicles drawn from memory, angles of approach, paths traced through the streets. Each line represented hours of silent observation. She turned the page and added more. A sequence of tire tracks pressed into gravel by the shooting range, footprints too heavy for casual hikers along the ridge. A pattern was forming. Emily knew patterns meant intention, and intention meant danger. Still, she didn't panic. Mason had drilled patience so deeply into her that even her own fear bent beneath it. She allowed the shadow to grow, allowed it to reveal itself. A reaction too soon could ruin everything. At the sheriff's office, she overheard fragments of a closed-door meeting. Low voices, tension in the air. By the time Sheriff Dalton left the room, his shoulders were heavier, his jaw tight. He didn't notice Emily across the street, watching from behind a curtain of townsfolk. But she read his body language as clearly as a page. Something was wrong. Later that night, confirmation came. A local business vandalized. Windows broken, paint scrawled across brick, a crude message meant to intimidate. To the townsfolk, it was shocking. To Emily, it was calculated. A test. Mason had warned her about this years ago. They probe first. Weakness isn't taken, it's offered. Emily walked past the shop the next morning, her expression carefully neutral. Neighbors clustered, whispering theories, teenagers, maybe outsiders passing through. She said nothing, but every nerve in her body told her the truth. This wasn't random. It was organized, and Willow Creek was the target. That evening she climbed the ridge again. Binoculars pressed to her eyes, she scanned the town in silence. Lights flickered on, shadows stretched across streets, and in between she caught the movements of strangers she didn't recognize. Groups shifting with purpose, splitting apart, regrouping. Coordinated, trained. Her pencil moved across the notebook as she recorded everything. Timing, positions, escape routes. She wasn't just observing anymore, she was building a battlefield map. And yet, for all her preparation, a knot tightened in her chest. What if she miscalculated? What if her silence let the threat grow too large? She closed her eyes briefly, forcing her breath to steady. Mason's voice returned, firm, unyielding. Fear will tempt you to act before it's time. Don't. Patience is power. The first shot isn't about skill, it's about inevitability. She opened her eyes again and the knot unraveled into calm. She would wait. She would prepare. And when the moment came, there would be no mistakes. For now, Willow Creek saw only Emily Carter, their quiet librarian, carrying groceries and cataloging books. But beneath that gentle mask, she was building something no one else could see. A web of observation, a map of defense, a readiness that hummed in her bones. The syndicate believed they were the hunters. They had no idea the town already had its guardian. And as Emily stood in the shadows, her rifle balanced against her shoulder, she whispered into the night, "Come closer, I'm ready." Why hadn't they come sooner? The question lingered in Emily's mind as she crouched at the edge of the forest, binoculars raised, eyes locked on Willow Creek's quiet streets. The town slept beneath the comfort of porch lights and crickets, yet Emily felt the tension hanging in the air like a wire pulled too tight. For weeks, she had tracked them, vehicles circling the same streets, men walking routes that weren't casual, a rhythm too controlled to be chance. She knew the confrontation was near. She thought of Mason, nights lying belly down in mud, raindrops sliding into her eyes while he whispered through the dark. The first confrontation will test you more than any drill. You'll want to move. You'll want to strike. But hold your fire until the moment folds itself into your hand. Then, and only then, act. Emily waited for that fold in the fabric of events. The townsfolk didn't see it. At the diner, laughter spilled from booths. At the gas station, a boy filled up his truck with music blaring from rolled-down windows. But in between those moments of ordinary life, shadows drifted where shadows didn't belong. They lingered near the old warehouse. They parked across from the sheriff's office, pretending to be locals. And each time, Emily mapped them in her notebook with the calm precision of a chess player anticipating checkmate. That night she tested the escape routes she'd been rehearsing in her mind. Moving silently through back alleys and overgrown paths, she timed how long it would take to shepherd children from the schoolyard to cover. She marked the homes of the elderly, memorizing which windows were closest to the woods. Every calculation was a promise. If danger struck, no one would be left behind. When she returned to her cabin, she disassembled and cleaned her rifle, every motion slow and practiced. The metal gleamed beneath lamplight. Her fingers moved with a steadiness that masked the unease in her chest. Because beneath her discipline, Emily wrestled with a question she hadn't faced before. If she revealed herself, if she fired that first shot, what would her neighbors see? A protector, or a weapon hidden in their midst? She paused, cloth resting on the barrel, and let her gaze fall to the photograph tucked into the corner of her desk. Mason's face stared back, hard eyes softened only by the faint trace of a smile. She heard his voice again, echoing through memory. Dignity doesn't demand recognition. A true guardian doesn't care if the world calls her hero or threat. She just acts. The thought steadied her. She returned to her work. The first test came sooner than she expected. A scream cut through the stillness of town. Not a long one, just sharp, panicked, then gone. Emily froze, heart steady, breath shallow. She slipped into her jacket, pistol hidden at her side, and moved into the night. At the corner of Main and River Street, she saw it. A storefront window shattered, glass scattered across the pavement like broken stars, and three men slipping into shadows, their movements too deliberate to be random vandals. Emily didn't chase them. She sank into darkness, watching. She noted how one signaled the other with a tilt of the head, how their formation spread, covering angles instinctively. Professionals, testing, probing. Her pulse remained calm, but inside something else flickered: anger. This was her town. The laughter at the diner, the warmth of the library, the children who still waved at her when she walked home. These men thought Willow Creek was weak, disposable. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself. She could end it now. One clean shot from the alley's cover, but Mason's warning tethered her. Restraint is as powerful as the bullet. Choose the shot that changes everything, not the one that satisfies your fear. So she held. She let them vanish into the night. Back at her cabin, Emily drew their routes onto her map, the pencil biting into paper. The anger simmered low in her chest, but it sharpened her focus rather than clouding it. She knew now, the syndicate had crossed the threshold. They weren't just watching anymore. They were acting. She sat on her porch until dawn, the rifle leaning against her knee, the horizon bleeding pink and gold. Her neighbors stirred awake, unaware of how close danger had come. And Emily, silent and unassuming, whispered to the hills, "Next time you won't walk away." Why hadn't they noticed her yet? From her vantage point on the ridge, Emily Carter watched the syndicate thread through Willow Creek like shadows stitched into the fabric of the town. They parked outside the lumber mill. They lingered near the school playground after dusk. They moved with the careful rhythm of men trained to probe, to test, to measure how much resistance a place could offer. The town saw none of it. Children laughed, couples strolled, shopkeepers worried about weather more than anything else. But Emily's eyes missed nothing. Each angle, each reflection, each broken rhythm was inked into her mind, then mapped in coded detail in the notebook on her desk. Her preparations had reached their peak. Hidden caches of supplies tucked into the woods, markers scratched discreetly on fence posts to guide civilians toward safety if chaos struck. Escape routes rehearsed again and again until every step felt inevitable. She was ready. And yet she hesitated. Every night she returned home and cleaned her rifle, hands steady, movements precise. But inside, a question gnawed at her. Once she fired that first shot, everything would change. She would no longer be the quiet librarian. She would no longer belong to Willow Creek in the same way. The mask would fall and the truth, her truth, would step into daylight. She paused one night, cloth resting against the barrel, staring at the framed photo of Mason tucked against the wall. His words haunted her. The first shot is not just about the target. It's about you. Are you ready to live with what comes after? Emily exhaled, the sound barely audible in her empty cabin. She wanted to believe she was ready, but belief and certainty weren't the same thing. The syndicate escalated. A store vandalized. A farmer threatened at the edge of his field. Sheriff Dalton, usually unshakable, began to show strain around his eyes. The town whispered in confusion, kids acting out, drifters. No one wanted to say the word Emily already knew: organized, coordinated, a storm gathering. And still she waited. One evening she followed them. Silent as wind through the pines, she trailed a black SUV down back roads, never too close, never revealing her presence. The vehicle slowed near the abandoned warehouse district. 4 men got out. She crouched low, observing. They split into pairs, sweeping the area, testing doors, knotting sightlines. They weren't random intruders. They were preparing for something larger. Emily's hand brushed the pistol at her side. She could end one of them now. Slip through the shadows, silence him before the others realized. But she didn't move. Not yet. Mason's voice cut through her pulse. Patience isn't weakness. It's the weapon that decides battles before they start. So she watched, memorized, calculated. When she returned to her cabin, she marked their positions on her map. She circled the warehouse district 3 times, tracing angles of approach, likely lines of fire, choke points for retreat. She wasn't just preparing for a confrontation anymore. She was building a controlled battlefield. Still, the weight pressed against her ribs. She felt it strongest when she walked through town the next morning, carrying a stack of books for the library's front window. A boy waved at her from across the street. An old man tipped his hat. Emily smiled softly, her mask intact. But inside she thought, if they knew what I've done, if they knew what I'm about to do, would they still wave? Would they still smile? The question cut deep. She carried it with her through the day, through the evening, until the moment came when the waiting ended. She heard it before she saw it, the faint metallic clink of weapons being loaded, carried through the night air like a whisper. From her ridge, binoculars pressed to her eyes, she saw movement. Vehicles rolling slow through the edge of town, figures slipping between buildings. Coordinated, focused. Tonight it wasn't just testing. Tonight it was beginning. Her rifle was already assembled, scope adjusted, rounds lined in a neat row beside her. She measured the wind. She calculated elevation. Every movement was deliberate, calm. Her breath aligned with her heartbeat, her finger steady near the trigger. This was the moment Mason had prepared her for, the first shot. But Emily didn't fire, not yet. She held the crosshairs steady, tracking the lead figure as he signaled his men. She felt the gravity of it, the moment when her secret would shatter, when her town would never see her the same way again. She whispered into the darkness, voice low, resolute. "Not tonight, tomorrow." And she pulled back. The syndicate vanished into the night, unaware that every step had been catalogued, every movement mapped. Emily leaned against the rifle, her pulse steady but her chest heavy. She knew the confrontation was inevitable now. And when it came, she would not hesitate again. Why was the night so quiet? Emily Carter lay prone on the ridge above Willow Creek, cheek pressed to the rifle stock, crosshairs hovering over the faint outlines of men who thought themselves invisible. The town below was still, porch lights glowing, dogs asleep, children dreaming. But Emily knew the silence was a mask. Beneath it, movement rippled like dark water. The syndicate had arrived. They came in 2 vehicles, engines muted, headlights off. The first slowed near the square, disgorging 3 figures who fanned out with the precision of men who had done this before. The second rolled toward the warehouse district, headlights flicking once, a signal. Emily caught it. She logged the timing, the angle, the intent. Her notebook was no longer needed. The map of their strategy lived in her mind now. Mason's voice filled the silence in her head. "This is the moment. Your patience has bought you clarity. Now the shot will buy you control." Emily's breath stilled. Her finger brushed the trigger. One squeeze and her world would change forever. The librarian would vanish. The guardian would reveal herself. But her eyes closed for just a heartbeat, and in that pause, doubt slipped in. Would they see her as protector, or as something dangerous they never understood? Her heart thudded once, then she exhaled. The first shot cracked the night like a whisper of thunder. Clean, silent, final. One man dropped before he could even raise his weapon. The others froze, confusion breaking their rhythm. Emily adjusted, recalculated, and struck again, measured, deliberate. A second figure staggered, weapon clattering against the pavement. Panic rippled through them. They scattered, shouting, searching the rooftops and alleys, never looking toward the ridge where death already waited. Emily's pulse was steady, every muscle calm. This was where Mason had forged her, where patience, calculation, and restraint converged into inevitability. She shifted position, sliding along the ridge with the grace of someone who had done it 1,000 times in drills no one else had ever seen. The syndicate tried to regroup, one barking orders, another signaling retreat. Emily saw the leader's hand flick upward, saw the formation break and fired. The bullet cut through the night and he fell, the order silenced before it could spread. 3 shots, that was all it took. Not chaos, not noise, just precision, silence, and inevitability. The town never stirred. Lights stayed dim, windows stayed shut. To them the night was undisturbed, but Emily knew better. Willow Creek had been tested, and she had answered. She lowered the rifle, breath still, hands steady. Yet inside something shifted. She felt it, the line she had crossed. The moment Mason had warned her about. Once revealed, the truth could never be hidden again. As she cleaned her weapon in the dim light of her cabin, cloth sliding over steel, Mason's words echoed one last time. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And tonight Emily had acted. The guardian in shadow had become real. Why were they whispering her name now? At the diner, voices dropped when Emily Carter walked past. At the post office, conversations paused mid-sentence as neighbors glanced her way, then quickly turned back to their letters and stamps. Nothing was said outright, but something unspoken threaded the town together, an awareness that something extraordinary had happened during the night no one wanted to acknowledge. The vandalized storefronts were mysteriously untouched in the morning. The unfamiliar cars that had prowled the edges of town were gone. Sheriff Dalton offered no explanation beyond "situation resolved," but the tightness in his jaw told Emily he knew more than he was admitting. And then there were the questions. A young reporter named Carla stopped by the library with a notebook clutched against her chest. She lingered too long near the shelves, peering occasionally at Emily as if she might catch her in the act of revealing herself. Finally, she asked softly, "Were you up on the ridge that night?" Emily met her gaze, calm, unflinching. "I walk the ridge most nights." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Carla pressed, scribbling in her notebook. "People say you're always where trouble is, like you know before it happens." Emily allowed herself the faintest smile. "Books teach you to pay attention." The answer satisfied no one, but it gave nothing away. Still, the whispers grew. She was no longer just the librarian with a steady aim at weekend competitions. She was becoming something else in their eyes, something they couldn't name: protector, watcher, guardian, or perhaps a threat they didn't understand. That night she returned to her cabin and sat on the porch, rifle cleaned and stored, the notebook spread across her lap. Maps, angles, calculations. Every detail of the syndicate's incursion had been recorded, but her thoughts drifted to the townsfolk, to their fear, their awe, their suspicion. She thought of Mason, his gravel-toned warnings in the dark. When you act, people will see what they want to see. Some will call you savior, others will call you dangerous. You can't control their judgment. You can only control your choices. Emily closed the notebook gently. The choice had been made. And the syndicate wasn't finished. They had retreated, yes, but not destroyed. Men like that didn't vanish after one failed night. They regrouped. They adapted. They came back stronger, hungrier, more determined. Emily knew this because Mason had drilled it into her. The first victory is never the last. The enemy will always return. The question is, will you still be ready? So she prepared again. She sharpened her plans. She refined her maps. She memorized every ridge, every alley, every rooftop where she could place herself unseen. The town returned to its rhythm: school bells, grocery deliveries, gossip at the diner. But beneath it all, a quiet tension remained. Rumors passed in hushed voices. Emily Carter had been there. Emily Carter had stopped them. Emily Carter wasn't ordinary. And she felt it too in her bones. The calm wasn't real. It was only the silence before the next storm. As the moon rose above the hills and shadows stretched long across Willow Creek, Emily whispered into the night air, steady, resolute. "Come back, I'm still here." And somewhere beyond the forest's edge, the syndicate was already planning their return. Why did the air feel different tonight? Emily Carter lay on her stomach atop the ridge, scope sweeping the quiet streets of Willow Creek. To anyone else, the town seemed untouched, windows glowing soft, families gathered for supper, the smell of wood smoke threading through the valley. But Emily felt the shift. A heaviness pressed against the night, subtle but undeniable. Headlights flickered on the distant road, vehicles more than before. She steadied her breathing, every muscle poised. The syndicate had returned, stronger, smarter, unwilling to leave their failure unanswered. Mason's words pulsed through her memory. The final shot isn't about power, it's about inevitability. When you see it, you'll know. When you take it, nothing will ever be the same. They moved with precision this time. Small, coordinated teams slipping between warehouses, setting up positions at the edge of the square. Emily tracked them through her scope, noting angles, timing, hierarchy. She didn't just see men, she saw patterns, flaws, weaknesses. Her notebook lay open beside her, though she didn't need it anymore. Every alley, every rooftop, every escape route was etched into her mind. This was her map, her battlefield. The first group spread near the general store, Emily's sights fixed on the point man. Breath in, breath out. Her finger brushed the trigger, the shot cracked like a heartbeat, and the man crumpled, his weapon never fired. Panic rippled through them, sharp and disoriented. They scanned rooftops, alleys, the empty street corners. None of them looked to the ridge. She shifted her scope, realigned. Another breath, another shot. A second figure collapsed, their formation fractured. She moved with the patience of a predator, striking only when the shot promised control. 3, 4, 5 men fell in silence, each placed with surgical precision. The others scrambled, breaking pattern, their coordination unraveling. Then she saw him, the leader, separate from his men, shouting orders, trying to rally panic into control. He stepped into the open, careless in his desperation. Emily's scope centered on him, wind measured, distance calculated, timing perfect. Her breath slowed. The world narrowed to the faint curve of his shoulder, the small rise and fall of his chest. Mason's voice whispered in her mind, "A true shot is not taken, it's accepted. The moment chooses you." She squeezed. The leader collapsed into silence. The remaining men froze, their resolve shattered. One by one they broke and fled, stumbling into the darkness, leaving behind the ruin of their intent. Emily lowered her rifle, heart steady, hands calm. She had done what needed to be done, no more, no less. By dawn, Willow Creek stirred awake, unaware of how close they had come to ruin. Children walked to school. Shopkeepers unlocked doors. The diner filled with laughter and coffee. To them, the night had been ordinary. Emily returned to her cabin, cleaned her rifle with the same meticulous care as always, and tucked her maps back into their drawer. She sat on the porch as the sun rose, watching light spill across the hills. Her neighbors would never know the truth. They would never know how one woman had carried them through the storm, and that was fine. She didn't need them to. Mason had taught her well. Dignity doesn't demand recognition. It simply acts. And in that silence, Emily Carter remained what she had always been, guardian, shadow, protector, invisible until the world forced her hand.